Is it on video? You've been at sea on Puffin for 219 days. You arrived in Cape Town on Friday on the Taiwanese fishing vessel Zi Da Wang. Your cabin mate on the trawler was a crew member with the real name of Davy Jones. You have consumed a fair amount of steak and red wine over the weekend. You were told you are mad by some of my non-sailing friends. You have somewhat regained your sea legs. We only have had to pick you up from the floor once after you tried to get out of the stationary bed. So how do you feel?
So I'm exhausted now, if I wasn't before. I feel great, I feel amazing. I feel lucky, very lucky to be here, you know, because this extended family that's adopted me passed me on from my Taiwanese family to my South African family. Yeah, I just feel very lucky. I'm starting to get to grips with what's happened. I think the fishing boat was a bit of a pause, and now it's beginning to sink in, and I'm kind of back in reality.
Before we recap your rescue from Puffin deep in the South Atlantic, I want to talk about and congratulate you on something which has not really been highlighted in the media yet. One of the big attractions for sailors to do the GGR is the opportunity to go around Cape Horn, because it's such a rare feat. Now the record keeper of these circumnavigations, rounding of the Horn, is done by the International Association of Cape Horners. And just in short, they use the definition to recognize a passage around is it must be part of a passage of at least 3,000 sea miles, which you've done, and it must be from 52 south in the Pacific, around Cape Horn, to 52 south in the Atlantic, which you also did. You were picked up around about 45, 46 south in the Atlantic, and only 300, give or take a couple, sailors has ever done this, and I think that's very special. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, it is special. There's no two ways about it. It is still the one of sort of the ultimate goal for sailors. It's the thing we all dream about. Cape Horn. It has to be in context. You said 200 and whatever it was, 19 days at sea, though. You know, the incident, you know, with Puffin was 10 seconds in 219 days. But rounding the Horn was very special, and I had a bit of an adventure there as well. As things happen, we had a bit of a gale and a few issues there, so that wasn't a straightforward rounding. It was a very special rounding, and I remember distinctly that night I'd been hand steering throughout the previous day. It was pretty damn awful, to be honest, and through that night, seeing the two lighthouses and making my landfall, that was Cape Horn. And then as dawn broke that day, I was actually heading north towards the Horn and the peninsula there to get behind it, to get into the lee of the Horn, to get out of the weather, because Puffin needed repairing. And I was looking for an anchorage. So that night I'd seen the two lighthouses, which was just a great feeling, because there's not many lights out there. Not many lights out there. To see the two lighthouses was cool, and a lot of sailors will go around Cape Horn and never see it. A lot of sailors will go around Cape Horn and see the lighthouses. Other sailors might see the Horn because they're there in daylight, and very few get very close. But I got to see the lighthouses, and then as dawn broke, it was there. I mean, you know, it was there, and the islands around it, and that was quite amazing.
Wow.
And I saw it for hours because I was trying to get past the damn thing and into safe water. So
you were in the after your rounding, you were in the lee of an island there, because you, as you said, you had to fix your hydrovane. And then you left. I mean, you must have been somewhat relaxed, because you were still in the Furious. You're still going to be in the Furious 50s for quite a while. But you're sailing into Atlantic. You're homeward bound.
Homeward bound. So that should have been that. So I had, we had to spend time in the anchorage in Picton, Isla Picton Island, and an anchorage called Caleta Banner. Beautiful place, and I left in the snow. Can you believe? I left it.
We saw some pictures.
I left in the snow, and I left in great shape, great order, ready for the next part.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was. You forget if you're not careful, you're still at 56 degrees south.
Yeah.
We're a long way south. You know, you're not exactly home and dry, but it should have been the homeward trip. It was all downhill from here.
Yeah.
Is the idea as you go through the South Atlantic.
Yes.
And
then, as we said earlier on, around 45, 46 south, you got walloped by a really seriously deep and intense Atlantic low.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, so I had a great run towards the Falklands. I had a few days, great days, had the Falklands current with me, it was going marvellously, and then I had a week of headwinds. So I was pretty fed up with that, to be honest. I'd been beating for a week, and that had pushed me quite east. So I was probably 800 miles away from the Falklands and maybe 400 or 500 miles above South Georgia. And there was a warning. We actually got a weather warning from GGR.
Yeah.
And the process is GGR will only give you a weather warning when the weather's going to be pretty bad, and they have a cut-off point. And it was more than a warning. This time I actually got routing from GGR. So GGR basically said, go south, sail south as fast as you can to get out of the way of this low.
yeah.
So that's quite unusual. I think in the whole trip that was the first time I'd actually had not just a weather warning, but a routing to go with it. So I knew it was quite bad from that. So I did that. I followed the advice, and I sailed south as fast as I can, kind of southeast. Really is what I could do with the wind direction that I had, and the barometer just kept falling. I've never seen anything like it. It just kept going down and down. I was continuing to follow this advice, hoping this was still the best thing. And I thought, well, this low is pretty intense, because if I'm going away from the low and it's falling like this is getting serious.
I remember seeing it was. If I remember correctly, it was something like 936, which is pretty low.
Yeah, pretty low. I'm not sure. I sort of looked up, I didn't quite see that, but it dropped. It was dropping like crazy. So I guess that was about 12 hours. And look, this is 219 days at seas. We've done the North Atlantic, South Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. We've rounded the Horn. It's not our first gale. It's not Puffin and I's first rodeo, you know. So until then, it was pretty much a standard gale. It was building up. It was manageable. I'd gone through the normal reefing process, as you would. And somebody flicked a switch. Somewhere in the heavens, a switch flicked, and I use that term biblical, and maybe I shouldn't, so I do apologise if that offends anybody, but when I say that, I mean Old Testament biblical. This was fire and brimstone stuff. It was definitely the worst conditions I'd seen, worse than the storm as we went around the Horn. And the boat, we were just overpressed. I'm pretty much I was down to bare poles, but very soon after that I was down to bare poles. And the steering system that we rely on very heavily, the self-steering, couldn't cope with it, certainly. So I was hand steering, or I used to like to call it helping the wind vane steering. But we were just tremendously overpressed, and the boat continually was being rounded up, accelerating, and laid flat on her side, and just tremendous amounts of water in the cockpit. And of course, it's the sea, so the wind speed went through the roof, and the gusts went through the roof, but the sea state was just disgusting. And you end up with a cross sea, which is typical with those systems down there. So again, that wasn't the first time we'd seen that. But the seas were very confused. I don't know how big they were. They were big. They were very confused, and we talk about gusts, you know this. Well, when all the gusts join up, there don't seem to be gusts anymore. Occasionally there was lulls in between the gusts, but the gusts were just, tremendous. I remember seeing you have a wind indicator on your masthead, a hawk sometimes we call it. I saw that blow off. I don't know if I've ever told you that.
No.
I saw that go. That was pretty windy. That was pretty windy. So we were overpressed. I was running out of new ideas, to be quite frank, and I knew there was something. It obviously got to a point, and I can't quite describe it to you, but I knew we were at a point where I was potentially in trouble, or trouble was just around the corner. And I've said before, I'm a bit of an over communicator. I felt a really strong urge that I needed to let the world know that I had what we would call normally like a pan.
Yeah.
So don't come and get me.
Yeah.
But I've got a problem. I'm dealing with it. I don't know what my outcome's going to be. But this is more than just a bad day at the office. So I've been trying to do that, and maybe we can talk about that. But I had a very strong urge to do that, partly because I needed to be in the cockpit, and I felt I was only one more wave away. I've been lifted out of the cockpit twice, I think, by that point, by weight of water. It's just the most amazing. You almost can't believe it happens, and you're tethered on. And that had happened to me once before, going around the Horn, when I'd been lifted out of the cockpit and laid on ended up on the life raft, spread eagle. But it's just literally, you're just being washed out by the weight of water, and it's this secondary or third swell that's catching you, because you're keeping the main swell to the stern of the boat or to the quarter. So it got very bad, and I'd actually eventually got through to GGR to put a call in there on the satellite phone, which is part of our procedure. And I had Don on the phone, he was very kindly telling me, "Oh, you're on your own. You've got to deal with it." I didn't know that, but it was nice of him. It was nice of him to remind me of that. I thought, but he was great. What he was doing was he's got a sailor on the end of the sat phone who's in a bad situation. He's trying to calm that, trying to calm you down and making sure that you're thinking straight. And while we're on that call, boom, bang, the boat got hit by a breaking wave. I felt the impact. It's like being T-boned in a car. It's very analogous to a car accident. Anyone's been hit when they're in the car by another car. Very analogous to that. And then I guess a couple of seconds later I came to, and my world was beginning to change. And she'd rolled. We'd capsized. And I believe we rolled all the way around. The cabin was immediately full of water, not full of water, but a lot of water in the cabin, and there was still water coming in. I went through the companionway, popped out through the hatch to take a look what damage we had, and the rig was gone, the mast was gone. It was hanging over the starboard side of the boat.
What do you think at that moment? When you pop out your mast gone?
Honestly, Riaan, it's the strangest thing. My will, I just flipped from A to B. I flipped from Golden Globe race, circumnavigating on my way home, to, I guess you'd call it survival mode. But my will changed. Like everything, I knew my will had changed. I knew where I was in the ocean. I knew that chances of rescue are very high these days. But I also knew my boat was in serious trouble. And it was like an immediate loss. Like I've just lost it. And if there was a pause button, can I rewind 10 seconds, please? And you just know you can't. And it's just this sinking feeling of everything's now changed. And you can't reverse it. You can't ask for a second go. You can't reload, play the game again. And then it was straight into what next. That's how I work, luckily. So I didn't spend a moment bemoaning my situation. I actually retreated very quickly down below because it was pretty horrible and scary out there. Closed the hatch, and if I recall, I still had water coming in, and I went and secured one of the skylight hatches in the boat in Puffin had burst open during the rollover, which is an interesting thing in itself. And surface water that's still on the deck and smaller waves that are breaking on the boat were still coming in. So I think what I did then is I'd secured that hatch, cut lines away that were stopping it being closed.
Bilge pumps going?
Bilge pumps were going, yeah, you're absolutely right. Auto bilge pumps were going. That's right, auto bilge pumps were going. I turned the bilge pumps off, which I know sounds counterintuitive. I turned the bilge pumps off because I wanted to know, so the next thing is keep the water out. Yeah. So have I got water ingress? Because the bilge pumps are going to hide that for a while. They're also chewing up power very quickly. So I turned my bilge pumps off. And if I recall, I started manually bilge pumping. and really what I'm doing. Yes, I'm trying to get water out, but I was just processing what to do next. And within a relatively short amount of time, I convinced myself I didn't have water ingress from elsewhere, and I then stopped that. So I said, fine, I'm happy with that. I've got 8 inches of water above the floorboards now. The cabin's chaos, right? Some of my floorboards had burst. I was storing water jerry cans below floorboards. Things that we had secured really well had not survived the rollover. It was quite a thing, and you know, I was ready for a storm, so everything was away. There was nothing out that didn't need to be out, but the cabin was still chaos. The forepeak was, I couldn't actually access the forepeak. We had good stowage in there, and that's kind of what's convinced me that it definitely was a complete roll. Lockers that had fixings to close them, or locker lids, you know, future reference, had burst open. So the weight of whatever storage stuff that was stored underneath them. So I've got stuff floating around. Floorboards are gone, so near my galley area I've got nothing to stand on. I'm literally standing in a hole full of water. I've got blood's all pouring off my forehead still. I keep wiping this blood out of my eyes. I remember taking the blood out of my eyes. But I knew that wasn't bad, because you crack your head as a kid, it bleeds like crazy, and it was the same thing. I could feel it. I was like, okay, that's fine.
And somewhere in the process you set off the EPIRB.
Yeah, we set the EPIRB off before that. So EPIRB's done. I lost contact with Golden Globe because the satellite phone hit the roof, but the EPIRB was triggered. And when we go back and do this scientifically, we'll get my order of events correctly. During this period, I also set off the YB tracker emergency button. Yep. And I did that, I recall, I did that consciously because I wanted to give 2 messages. So the EPIRB could be an accident, but you send out 2, and it's like sending up 2 flares. Seemed like a good idea. And I was also conscious that I thought that the messages were prioritised once you press that button, because the system goes into an emergency mode. Anyway, so that had happened. I was happy with the water situation, and basically next I went to deploy the drogue, because this gale had not finished. The conditions were just the same outside. The mast, because she'd broken and the rig was hanging over the starboard side, was acting as a sea anchor to some degree. But as I'm pumping the water out, the thing that's going through my mind is, we're going to get rolled again here, right? How do I make sure we don't get rolled multiple times in this situation? So I got tools together, and earlier in the gale, I'd got into the scenario where I'd left it too late probably to deploy a drogue, and I couldn't actually access the drogue properly. Now that we were stationary, effectively, I could. So I got tools out, went outside. I think what I did actually, I cut some rigging away to clear my access. Went back out, got into the lazarette, and prepared the drogue. Put the big shackle on, got the bridle on. And these drogues are kind of a one-shot thing. You definitely want them to go out the first time. So I'm trying to not flake this thing out, but lay out a bag of chain, drogue bag, which probably weighs about 12 kilos, bag of chain, which is about 15 kilos. And my bridle was already in place, and my chain was already shackled to my drogue. There was only one shackle needed putting together, but it was a shackle that needs a tool really to get it on. Not easy in those conditions. Surprisingly difficult, but we did it. Got the drogue deployed, and the moment that drogue was deployed, to be fair, she came around with a stern to the main wave set, and you go from feeling like you're definitely on the edge of being rolled again to just on a rodeo horse at this stage. It ain't comfortable, but you felt a lot more secure. So that was kind of step 1, step 2. So really it was, the rig's there. There was nothing I could immediately do about the rig. It's hitting the side of the boat, but it wasn't trying to destroy the boat as such. It's acting as a sea anchor. I went to control the water. I made sure we had no more water ingress. We've got emergency beacons going off at this time. I've kind of sorted myself out to a degree, deployed the drogue, back down below now, and every time I stopped to think, I was pumping bilges for 24 hours. getting the water out of the boat. Yeah, so that was,
Yeah.
and how long that took, I'm not sure, but they were the kind of first actions, you know.
And then what was the time lapse before you had the first communication that the Falklands fishing vessel, I think that was the first thing, they dispatching the Falklands fishing vessel towards you?
Yeah, well actually we had one before that. So the YB system works very well for
Yeah.
transferring messages from the GGR. So GGR sent me a message quite early on. I'd say within the first 6 hours I got a message that a vessel had been identified. It was only 120 nautical miles away. I'd followed that message with a second sat phone call. I had a secondary sat phone, backup sat phone call, sat phone working now. And Don at the GGR said, yeah, they've found a vessel, no ETA officially, but it's 120 miles away, probably about 12, 14 hours. Fantastic.
And your mindset is, great, I'm
Great
going
news.
to sort of British soil the Falklands.
Yeah, well, this was a boat, yeah, and I thought, my assumption was it was the Falklands. This
Yeah.
wasn't the fishery patrol boat, this was an earlier one.
That's it, yeah.
So that was on the YB, and it's getting dark now. So in between this time, I'd been out to try and cut the rig away, and I'd essentially been beaten back by the weather. It was still too bad. I'd taken away the backstays, I'd got rid of the runners, port cap shrouds I'd managed to cut through, but I'd got it.
Was that with a bolt cutter or was that a grinder?
Angle grinder.
Okay.
So I got into the tool, got my angle grinder, got the angle grinder out, got that set up. There's times like this you think, I wish I'd put a blade on this first before I left. Find the blades, put the blades on. And I got a lanyard and I tied it to myself. I tied the angle grinder to my life jacket. Because I'm lying spread eagled on the side deck trying to cut these shrouds away. And yeah, as I said, I think I got rid of the backstays and the port caps and the runners. And it was just horrendous out there. It was too soon to be cutting the rig away, so I retreated. Had this message, yellow brick, had a call with GGR. They've identified a vessel, maybe 12 hours. Fantastic, yeah, very lucky. It's getting dark, and I kind of concluded that the other thing I really wanted to know was how long have I got in this gale before it abates and I can start to do something else, because it's still pretty damn rough out there. It's not like the gale stops just because you've lost your rig. So anyway, I tried to take some rest, I think, at this time. I'd cleared the cabin of anything that was going to kill me if the boat rolled over again. So I've got hold of floorboards, and they were all chucked in the forepeak, and water jerry cans I've got out of the way. So yeah, we had the message, there's a boat, and then the next message came through a little while later and said, no, that boat's
You're not going to the Falklands.
You're not going to the Falklands. The vessel hasn't diverted. It wasn't a false alarm. Whatever hadn't worked out. We never found out what. But and I think GGR said, yeah, nobody's coming. I think that was the phrase. Wasn't what they meant. But I remember looking at it and going, okay. But to be frank, I was working through a process I did not expect. I had no expectation. I had a high expectation of rescue because the international system works so well historically. So there's been a high success rate of these rescues. So I had a high expectation we'd pull this off, but I fully expected to be there, anything up to 5 days, because I'm 46.5 degrees south in the South Atlantic. There's not many ferries going between the Falklands and South Georgia, so Cape Town. So I fully expected it to be long. I'd already accepted that, and in my mind, I was just so far down my job list, which was about keeping the boat, first of all, turning it into a life raft, and then eventually getting to the point where some degree of self-rescue might be needed. I still felt maybe it was going to take me 24 hours or 48 hours to get to a point where I could have had a jury rig sorted out. But Ian, you might have to sail 500 miles towards the Falklands before somebody gets to you. You certainly can't expect to be picked up in 24 hours, 30 hours. And I needed to stay out of that life raft, which, by the way, I had checked was still on the boat, which was a good question, which Don did ask, but I had gone out and checked.
It was on the deck, because a lot of the GGR competitors actually, when the race started, put it below.
Yeah, it's a good point. My life raft was on the aft, the poop deck, you might call it, the aft of the boat, and it had its normal cradle, and I had lashed it. I had put extra lashing on the life raft, so you always had to cut it away for it to release. But
did you know at that stage that Guy Waits lost his earlier?
I did know that, yeah. But it was interestingly, it was on my job list at Hobart to put lashings on my life raft. I'd left, we had these lashings, but by the time I got to Hobart, I'd put them on. But it hadn't moved, so the life raft was still there, which was good. But my mission was to stay out of the life raft, to stay with puffing. So basically, I was on a job list. I knew I had a job list. I was trying to take some rest. It'd gone dark. Not a very nice night, that one. Not a very pleasant evening at all.
No stargazing.
No stargazing that evening. I got my Tupperware box of snacks next to the bunk. I had water, so I'd eaten something. I'd only eaten sort of sweet stuff. And I strapped myself into the bunk for a couple of hours that night. It probably wasn't many hours, and I'm sure I didn't sleep a lot. But I had my full rig on, and I just thought, okay, you've got to lie down. My back was giving me a lot of pain, and I thought if I could stretch my body out and lie flat, I could keep it going, keep moving. I wanted to keep moving, keep mobile. And that was my other great anxiety really during the whole thing, was not getting injured any further.
Thinking of Abby's previous race.
Exactly, I kept thinking about Abby in the previous race, and it just so happened that my back was in spasm. It was running down my right leg. I could only pump bilges in one position, for example. And anyone that's pulled their back gardening will know exactly how it feels. But I was very aware that I could make this situation worse by being too machismo, too aggressive with trying to get things sorted out. And the ship's going to come and get you, but it's no good if you kill yourself in between. Or if I put myself out of action, I was also really aware there's only so many boats out there that can launch ribs, come alongside, get a incapacitated person out of a small yacht. Not easy. So I was just very conscious that I kept reminding, every time I did something stupid, and I probably did several stupid things along the way, I'm reminding myself this is, you don't need to do this. And
then at what stage were you told that the Zi Da Wang?
Yeah, so that was probably about the third or fourth message along. And prior to that, we'd had a message about the UK Fisheries Patrol boat, the Lilybet, which was like, winner. That was 30 hours away, according to my message at the time. So again, same thought process. Okay, I've got to keep going for 30 hours. That's another night. So I'd had a night, so I was going to go through another day and another night, and hopefully this vessel would get to me. So I'd taken that on board, and then we had the update that actually no, it's a fishing vessel called the Zi Da Wang, and she was. I was actually had an ETA of 1900 hours. That next day, so that felt pretty good. It was different. Interestingly, I'd seen one of these big fishing vessels a few days earlier around the Falklands, so I had this mental picture, and I didn't know the Zi Da Wang was going to be the same type of ship. She turned out to be exactly the same type of ship, strangely enough. So I had a mental picture of this fishing boat. And they're ships. There's these 76-meter long steel monsters, and it occurred to me. I thought, okay, how is this going to work? This is going to be quite interesting. But I'm delighted they're coming. They're very welcome.
And then you packed, you prepared.
I did.
You loaded your logs. Everything is set out, and then the ship just arrived much quicker than you thought.
Yeah. Well, I kind of carried on my other jobs. I went back to cut some more rigging away, secured the boom, which had become dangerous overnight. So I still had half a mast and a boom. So I secured the boom. I moved some of the wreckage of the spray hood away from the companionway because it would start making access hard. Went to get rid of my forestays, and I got washed off the foredeck. This is again with my trusty grinder tied onto me. The thing about when you're on the drogue, the stern of the boat is to the waves, to the main wave train, which means you're going to get pooped on a regular basis. So not every wave, but every so often we had a big breaking wave. And you kind of timed it. It'd been great for a few. So I got out the foredeck. I'm lying spread eagled. I'm reaching out with my grinder, and next thing, I'm hanging off. I literally went through the pulpit. I don't know how it did it to me, but water's amazing. It just moves you, throws you around like a rag doll. And I was kind of fine, but I was the wrong side of the boat. Most of me was off the boat. And again, I just said, Ian, don't be an idiot. Yeah. So I retreated bravely back to the cabin, recovered my grinder. The grinder stayed with me the whole time. It's in perfect order.
Kept on working.
Kept on working, amazingly. Retreated back, and I did. I kind of switched into getting ready to be rescued, and I packed. And you would have thought I was packing for my holidays, because suddenly I had time. So essentially, I made 3 packs. I made my absolute minimum pouch, which was in a small dry bag, which had my passport in it, and a few very, very precious items.
And the famous watch.
The watch, yeah. I was actually wearing this watch. I was wearing my Rolex. I was wearing. But I had on board my second timepiece was my wedding present from Sally.
Oh wow!
So I found that, my passport, my wallet, my iPhone, of course. There's a crucifix on Puffin, which people that know Puffin will know about this crucifix from the original owners, the Nally family. And I'd always kept it. So I kept it when I bought the boat from Mr. Van, and it's gone. Crucifix is gone, but I found it. So I literally fished around and I found this, and that I found it earlier the night before. So that went in the bag, and then Emma, my daughter, had written me a couple of letters, and they're a bit special, and they'd gone in there. So that was and the soft toy Puffin that I had to take back to my nieces and nephews. So that was supposed to go back with Puffin and I back to Wales and return to Wales. So that went in there. So I packed that. I packed a little day pack as well, with because at this point in my mind, I'm about to, I'm going to get rescued. Chances are I'm going to end up in the Falkland Islands, and then I'm thinking about salvage for Puffin. I had lots of plans going on.
Yeah.
So I packed a tiny little day pack with 1 change of clothes. I thought, well, if I get invited to the ambassador's ball, I'll need something to wear. But there wasn't much else in there apart from that. And then my normal sailing bag, which I put my logs in, and all the other things that I really wanted, my journals, because they were just all too big to go into anything else. Bunch of gear, clothes, and just stuff I wanted to salvage rescue off the boat. Zi Da Wang was not due for another few hours, and then I heard chatter on the VHF in Taiwanese, I guess, Popped my head out, of course. Couldn't see a boat, so I was like, okay, I'm getting them on the VHF. They're close, but I can't see them. And I scanned around. The sea state was, other people will tell us what it was, but it was probably still around 4 meters. So the sea state was pretty high still. I couldn't see the boat. Tried to make contact on VHF, couldn't get contact with each other. Went down below, carried on. I was actually doing this packing exercise. I'm still pumping bilges every couple of minutes going back in, because this. I think the thing was I was very conscious, and it's not 20/20 hindsight, that this might not work.
Yeah.
The sea state was pretty rough. This was a fishing boat that was coming along. It's very rare that fishing boats respond to these type of situations. No matter how professional the crew is, this is not going to be easy. So I was conscious of that. I'd only just come back from trying to cut the rigging, so my plan to keep the boat, Puffin and I, in sort of a survival state and potentially self-rescue was still in the back of my mind. So I was kind of still tidying up, and it'll make you laugh, but I'd made some food during this process. I had some hot food, I'd had some freeze-dried, and I kind of tidied the galley up. So I know, the things you do, right? Because I couldn't just leave an empty package there, I had to put it away properly. So strangest things. More chatter on the VHF, tried to talk to the Zi Da Wang, and then I got one response, and it said, "We're coming for you." Like, awesome, that's great, that's the plan. Still haven't seen the boat. Did some more stuff down below, came back up out the companionway, and my life, she was there. She was just appeared. It was quite amazing. And the skipper had brought her beam on to create a lee, and because I deployed the drogue, I was actually sitting really nicely for him. I was basically a stationary target, stationary as you can be in those seas, with my stern to the wave, the prevailing wave train, the main swell, and he brought the ship in, so he was creating a lee and he was beam on, and he was basically coming down onto me, which is absolutely bloody terrifying, to be quite frank, because this thing is big. This is a big boat, and essentially he's basically crashing into you. Is what's happening. It's a controlled crash. So they got closer and closer, and I could see the crew. So the challenge was we had no communication. So I didn't know what the skipper's plan was. He didn't know what I was doing. I could only guess what the plan would be, which was reasonably clear, but there was no communication, and it's happening fast. This is taking no time at all. It's taking me longer to tell you than it was taking for it to happen. And as the Zi Da Wang came down towards me, like so, the whole crew were out. They're all in their full gear, very professional. 56 faces looking down at me, and 56 faces and no ladder. So, so there was a little bit of a concern. I think, okay, what is it they think I'm going to do? Because again, no communication. I didn't know what their plan was. Was it be a scrambling net? Would it be a line? They've got a rescue boat on and a crane. There was no one near the rescue boat, so I kind of knew that wasn't happening. And then I clocked what the guy that I assumed was the bosun, and I could just tell he was the bosun. He was older than everybody else, and he was like looking. And we made eye contact, and then he heaved a line. It missed. Got another line across, which I actually got hold of, if I recall. And by now the boat were right on top of each other, and the next thing, boom, comes in contact, which any sailor will tell you it's like, if my stomach wasn't already so hollow for what was happening before Puffin hit the boat, God, it felt terrible. But I had the line, tried to get it to the bow, which is where the bosun wanted it. The boats surged away from each other. We lost that line. Everyone on the ship is saying, go slow, go slow, go slow in English. Doing what I can here, guys. They got another line to me. I secured that on the bow. Scrambled back around to the cockpit. And actually a pilot ladder then appeared. But we only had one line on, so I was calling for a second line. Again, communication, big challenge on board those boats in general and between us. Eventually got a second line, which I secured to the stern, and then, by then we'd come up boom, boom, boom with each swell. And what was truly dreadful is that Puffin was sort of turn, she would turn and try to almost turn as if she's going to go under the hull, as you know, you can get pulled under. So that was a concern. And the crew, they looked worried. So, I thought, well, if you guys are worried, I'm clearly, perhaps I should be worried. But at this stage, I had my little rucksack on, and I had my comms bag, which is the part of the grab bag system, with the emergency communication stuff in, much of which maybe I didn't need, but I had it with me, so that was, again, it just shows how the mind works in those scenarios.
But no time to go down and get the other stuff.
No, I closed the hatch, not knowing what was going on, and it was happening too fast. Definitely taking me longer to explain it. Got two lines on, the ladder came down the side. Eventually, that lined up with Puffin and sort of amidships, and I just had to pick my moment to jump from Puffin onto this ladder, kind of on the roll, as they used to say in the old days. Wait for the roll. As she rolled, I jumped and tried to scramble up. I think I took maybe 1 step, 2 steps before the guys had me by the hair and the ears, and then boom, they pulled me over the side, and then the two boats boom came back together again, and I was on the deck of the Zi Da Wang. So I was surrounded by happy faces patting me on the back, and it was quite a shock.
And on the ship, I mean, one of the really beautiful stories is that you were bunked with a guy, and it's not his nickname, it's his real name. It's Davy Jones.
Davy Jones Beltran from the Philippines.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for viewers who are not familiar with the term, is if you drown at sea, the marine saying is that you're going down to Davy Jones's locker. So there is a bit of irony. Supreme irony in that.
However, no one else saw the irony on board. Davy Jones was the guy on the radio who said, we're coming, because he's one of the English, the guys with the strongest English on board, let's put it that way. And obviously, my Taiwanese is very limited, and my Philippines and my Indonesian not great either. So Davey happened to be on the bridge, and he spotted Puffin first.
Yep.
And I've seen the footage that they filmed, and trust me, when we talk about finding boats and salvaging, this was a ship with my exact coordinates steaming right at me. If Puffin wasn't painted orange, you wouldn't have seen her at sea. So Davey had been the first person to see the boat. He'd also was the guy that said, "We're coming for you," and then they were patching me up and stripping me off and sorting out my bruises, and they said, "This is Davy Jones, and you're in with him." And I said, are you kidding me? You can't make this up. You're going to put me in Davy Jones's locker? And he goes, yeah, Davy Jones.
Oh, beautiful.
So lovely, and he's a fantastic guy. He was a superstar. Yeah. So he was my minder for my week on the boat.
Yes. And then Cape Town.
8 days on the Zi Da Wang. Going back half a step, Puffin, we'd let Puffin go, of course. So we're on the deck, and the bosun again couldn't speak to him. He just eyeballed, he just looked at me, and he had the line. He actually still had the long end of the line, and I just nodded because she had to go. She was slamming against the side of the boat, and they cut the lines, and. So that was that. It's not a boat, it's more than a boat at that point. She was my friend, and it was 4 years of work. It was, she kept me safe. So, but coming in with Davy Jones and the crew totally overtook all of that. I mean, it was probably a really good thing, because it was somewhat overwhelming to have 56 guys. All wanting to have a photograph with you, or it was just an amazing trip. So I just lived as one of the crew. I was bunked up with Davy Jones in one of the rooms.
Wanted to have fishing, but the season was already finished. It's a squid fishing vessel.
Yeah, they were fishing squid in Falklands waters. The big squid that they have down there, and they'd finished the season. They packed the boat up and they were heading home, and Cape Town was one of the potential stops for fuel. So they're going back to Taiwan before continuing to go fishing in Japan, Sea of Japan. So they were in the process of cleaning the boat, and they were in their kind of non-fishing mode. But the crew's work is work all day long. The first bell goes at 6 a.m, which is not a bell, it's an alarm, which is a bit of a shocker. I thought maybe I deserved to lie in. Apparently not. 6 a.m. The siren goes off. By 6:03 a.m. you're having your first bowl of rice of the day. So it all happens pretty quick. But 2 days in, I was ready to be a Taiwanese fisherman. So I felt pretty good. But it must have helped, because I think it pressed pause on the whole situation somewhat for me, mentally. And the crew were just wonderful. I mean, talk about making friends. Skipper was amazing. The captain, Captain Shi, was tremendous, and I was able to make a satellite call home for the first time from his sat phone. That was the next morning. Actually, they kind of tried to put me to bed, but they strapped me up and laid me down, and then fed me. So I was able to make satellite calls from the ship, and then send a few emails from the captain's laptop. But that was the only connectivity. So I was still very disconnected. And 8 days later, amazing, I'm back in Table Bay. I did say I was going to come back.
Yeah, you did.
I did say I was going to come back. It wasn't the way I was planning to come back.
When I interviewed you for your media stop, you said, I'm coming back.
Surreal. I mean, surreal's not in it. So we come into Table Bay. The day is a beautiful day, and we were delayed by the usual thing. You've got to wait your turn to get into the harbour. And all the guys on board are excited because they're coming into Cape Town. And you guys there, the GGR family, were there waiting to pick me up.
And the very exciting thing for me, and I hope for you too, you are flying out in a day or two, and you're actually going to LSO to see Kirsten Adderley's Simon coming in.
Yeah, it's the timings come together. And it's the only way I can get there first So I'm quite keen to get there before Kirsten at least, but although I may have cheated somewhat by that point, I don't know what class I'm in now, Yeah, so obviously I'm on my way home, really, but it's only going to happen once, and you know, these are my brothers and sisters that are coming home.
Yeah.
So,
Good luck.
sorry. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Okay.